welcome back.
This is Kareem.
And this is Travis, and this is High Points.
Sorry, I was just stretching.
Stretching's good for you.
Yeah. Topic of today, stretching. Do it.
Do more stretching. Listen to your parents and says, do more stretching. And as kids, we're like, no, we don't need to do that. We're fine. Look how mobile and flexible I am. Guess what? You need to stretch.
Yeah, stretching is really good. Like, before bed. You wake up in the morning.
After breakfast. After lunch.
Yeah,
just stretch all the time.
Yeah, because you might cough and pull out your back or something. So.
I know.
Anyway, so it's been another minute. I feel like I'm just going to get used to just saying this. I honestly might just have it pre-recorded and put my mouth behind the mic and just like blast and say, it's been a minute, we haven't recorded in a while, but sorry for the break. Anyway.
Yeah, life just gets crazy.
Yeah, it does.
In many different ways, and I think we're just trying to find our footing on how do we balance life and everything else that comes our way.
I also think that smoking weed definitely...
It definitely has its negative effects on us.
At least for me, sometimes
It gets the best of me some days.
You know what? It's like, you gotta take a hit, and that's fine, but I don't take just a hit, and I think, yeah. Anyway, so we're here for another episode, and we're just gonna talk about what has transpired in the last few weeks since our last episode. So just, I guess, with the political state of the world right now, I think a lot of people are settling in the idea that now, okay, Trump is going to be our new president this coming January. And what now? Like, where are we at now with just how the conversation is going with what's happening overseas, what's happening with the border, what's happening with immigration. And I think a lot of people are starting to have more dialogue around the reasons why the Democratic Party lost. And, we're starting to see that, more and more Americans, as polls were taken and they were being interviewed on the streets or whatever segments that were on, like, independent, YouTube shows and stuff, we're starting to see a lot of people are just really concerned about, the potential World War III narrative, just because, we sent long-range missiles towards Russia. The U.S. did that, and we provoked, a wider escalation here, where it's not off the table that Russia could potentially use, nuclear, warfare. And I think that, we have Biden in office, and I don't want to ever sit there and say, like, this is the Dems that are doing this, or the pro-war side, because I think it's the whole system, and I think Trump is not an anti-war president, and I think people will soon realize that coming soon, when you're, getting paid $100 million to annex the West Bank from Miriam Edelson. And then we just have, the escalation happening with Israel and Lebanon. We have the escalation, of course, still with the genocide in Gaza. And as Americans, we have to start asking ourselves, what does voting really mean if, we have someone in office right now committing some of the most heinous crimes against humanity that is basically dragging all of us Americans into this, and we can't even put a stop to it. We can't even urge our representatives, our leaders, to stop this, when polls have showed that the overwhelming majority of Americans want an end to supporting war. Like, this is not up for debate anymore. Americans have made their stance clear. I mean, at least the overwhelming majority of Americans have made themselves clear. We are not for war. And I don't think that's a controversial, opinion or demand even. I think that it's really that...
like, why would an American want war? I guess it's kind of like... I don't think...
We're an imperialistic country. And
yeah, for sure, from that standpoint. But I would say that majority of the Americans are sitting there saying no to war. Most of them would never could justify war in general, just because, most Americans are selfish and just don't want to put their money towards something that doesn't really benefit them in their eyes. is more what I'm getting at. And then I think, like you're saying, is that, yes, I think everyone is feeling the escalations around. Like also just, we're waiting for what Iran's going to do, back towards Israel.
There was some hacking going on where there were some hackers in Iran
Mm-hmm.
that were able to get, like, obviously, like, confidential intelligence from Israel, and this is just all these predictions. I don't even want to say predictions. I think there's evil put into the art, right? The art that's essentially we're consuming, like that movie that came out on Netflix or whatever, that was talking about like how the real World War III is going to start in the hacking and the shutdown
I
of
definitely think
the internet and all that.
there's definitely going to be more of a digital presence. I think is in the next World War. I think financial markets and you have senators in the United States already claiming that they're going to crash and destroy financial markets of people. So
So I
it's
think
kind
we're
of like,
already in the early stages of World War III. I think we're in it, right? I think there's very much world war going on / genocide, and I think a lot of countries are on edge. And the ICC officially, put out the arrest warrants for Netanyahu, and over 100 countries are obligated to.
way too late, but
Way too
we'll
late.
take it.
But now we have the U.S. Being the only real, well, I guess in Germany too, but being like the real megaphones to the world that yes, we are the greatest bullies of the world, and that our very credibility, our very reputation to be able to ever have the moral high ground, which has never really been, in my opinion, like culpable. I've never understood why that the U.S. has ever claimed to be a part about international law and democracy when we are the one country that is essentially committing the most vile acts of crimes throughout the world. Like we have military bases all throughout every corner of the world. That clearly shows that our intentions are not to be the police of the world if we are supporting such evils that are happening right now. Like truly and 100%, like we're funding a genocide right now. So to me, the moral question of now trying to turn everyone in Congress against the ICC and want to invade the Netherlands or the Hague or whatever just because their allies being criticized. And we have our crazy ass senators, like Lindsey Graham, making all these disgusting, vile claims that like we need to go after them because they're going to be after us next. I think that if that's where your head is at, you're outing yourselves as, yes, you're guilty and complicit of the very same evils that are.
Yeah, why would they be next?
Yeah, so like, yeah, it makes people squint. So to kind of like not harping a lot into this, I'm not a journalist. I'm not a political, politically educated on all forms or geopolitically educated on all things. Like I'm just an observer, and I'm someone who has relation to this issue because I am of Palestinian heritage,
and you have your opinion.
And I have my opinion, and I just think as an American, that the conversation, the dialogue has to be had. There shouldn't be this, anyone shouldn't just be fear mongered into not talking about things when you live in a country. We're allowed to criticize our own government, but we can't criticize a foreign government, without being, canceled or having these new laws being passed that basically censor your free speech. And we can't even sit here now as Americans and say that we're truly in a free country anymore when laws are being enacted to prevent people from ever criticizing Israel. I think that right there and then, like, every American should be outraged, including Jewish Americans who are outraged and speaking out. But there's many that are fully for this bill, and it doesn't make sense. Why would you want that? Why would you want people to be, more? Why would you want the tension to rise more when people are already squinting at the state of Israel and all the people defending them? And then you want to have this bill that says that. Like, why would you want to be equated to someone being, critical of a nation and or a political movement and wanting that to be associated with your religious and ethno identity? Like, why would you want that? So to me, I think we're in a place now where true anti-Semitism is going to rise and true Islamophobia is going to rise, and
because it's all going to be like more
Americans'
swayed.
freedoms are being compromised all for the sake of this. Like,
just from like our government basically persuading and I've lost the word,
At least
like
it's the year of
manipulating,
truth.
like trying to manipulate the truth of it is what I'm trying
But
to
at
say.
least it's the year of truth, and I think all of these evils are being exposed, and I think Israel's reputation is forever ruined.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it hasn't been, in my opinion, before. I think people have always known. It's just the powers that be are the ones that are able to trickle the influence of power and fear throughout people not wanting to speak out at large. But I think people have known for a really long time, and the Great Awakening is happening.
And same thing if you look at like back to you were saying that freedoms are being taken away and those type of things. Like you even have where I think the upcoming ban of like TikTok in January or something. I think that's still in effect. And then like you have like you're going to see the rise of all sorts of new social media apps that are going to constantly get shut down or something like that. Is what I think the path of it's going on.
You can't censor the truth when the truth has been been ready to come out. I mean, I think people just want truth. People just want answers. We're so tired of living in this facade of thinking that the I guess like mainstream media. What's that word called? Like when they're
Propaganda?
No, just like the legacy media. Like I feel like it's dying out. People have
mainstream media
unsubscribed to it for a long time, and they've wanted to be able to say like, we have eyes and ears. We have social media. We are speaking to people on the ground. We're speaking to each other. We're living through this. You cannot hide the truth anymore.
They can manipulate and make the story.
The programming, because this is what these channels are called, right? Programming. They're your programs. What programs do you want to watch? It's all programs. It's all these terminology, all these words are
It's an interesting way of looking at it.
But yeah, like I've always thought that, right? I always thought like, what, go after this program or watch this next program or
and our next program.
There's always something in its program. It's like they're telling you. They have been telling us since I've been born. Since I've been born, I've been able to be a kid who's just been so observant of the things around me, especially when I learned a lot about optical illusions very early on at a young age. And seeing all the optical illusions throughout like Disney cassette tapes and the front covers and just throughout the movies. When you're on these like websites, when your older siblings or friends will be like, oh, did you know that there was like this image in a Disney movie, and you'll see it, and then there's a compilation that shows you all throughout, media that we consumed as children. You're seeing all this perversion and all these explicit content and optical illusions, and that's like imprinting on you. That's that programming, in the most deceptive of ways. But some of the most just ironic programmings are the ones that are so blatantly out there, and they're telling you what they're saying and doing, and essentially trying to cultivate a seed of I don't know, mind control in you that allows you to just be a puppet of whatever narrative that's out there, and essentially now you become their military spokespeople. Like they're the ones advocating for the bad things that are being pushed because now you're propagandized. And I think to say all of this, it's like we just have to be aware of the things that we consume and the information that we consume and how we're having conversations and dialogue. Go into it with an open mind. Understand that people consume media from all different forms, and the only way to be able to have true unity is to have the dialogue, is to have these conversations, so people know that they're not just biased all the time, but they can be aware of it at least. To be like, and I think that goes to say why I've like not been as active on this podcast. It's that I'm living through something very, very personal, but I know it's personal to a lot of people that are not also, related to this issue directly. And I think that goes to say that there are people who are having more of that dialogue, and that's what's helping this movement shed light on the powers that be that control this country and are enacting this evil.
And I would even say that just not even with the genocide going on, I think there's other facets of our government that's being exposed left and right, and I think that's just
Big pharma.
Big pharma, and then with the food, with the additives and the colors and those type of things going in there. Like you have EPA type things. Is that good or bad? So I think what I'm getting at is that most people, I think, are becoming more distrusting in their government, and I think that on top of what we just spoke about is I think everyone's kind of trying to find what is the full truth, because no one believes in anything anymore. Like if you ask anyone on the street, do you trust your government? My guess is almost most of them would say no. Like,
Yeah, every now and then you'll find someone who's
you'll find someone.
Their personality is a politician.
You know, they might say
love,
something, but
yes.
they might all of a sudden, you know, I don't know. It's just I would say that majority of the people that I interact with, they don't trust, and or they don't fully believe what they're being told. Maybe that's how to look at it. Is that they take it more as a grain of salt type thing.
Yeah. But I think just where we are at now, it almost feels like just dystopic to kind of be in the early stages of, you know, such rising tensions between nuclear powers, and we're, you know, almost feeling like, yes, days are going by and we're kind of doing the same things and celebrating the holidays and the traditions and seeing friends and family and existing essentially with all that, like, glooming, like, feeling of, like, I don't know, impending danger or doom, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like it's in the background almost, and I feel like at least that's what I feel, because I'm seeing these people, a small elite class that is basically representing millions upon millions upon millions of people that may lose their lives based off of these people and their selfish agendas. And I don't know, I'm so in the place now where, like, I just want to, you know, empower the people in all forms. Like, just please, like, do whatever it takes to be educated, informed, aware. Stop feeding into just the programming of marketing yourself all the time and thinking that's the only validity and quality to your life, is that you have to market yourself on, like, social media to be, I don't know, this influencer or anything that's of anything in the vein of vanity. Do things and be an influencer with information, spread information. Like, we're here to be the future for the next generations, to be those leaders, and I believe that there's a lot of people doing that, but we need to encourage it more because the tides are shifting, and I think we're
definitely on a brink of a political change in some aspect, you know, or another political revolution. You know, I think we haven't had one in, I don't want to say centuries because we've only been around for like 200 and some years, you know, but we haven't had a major one probably in the last century. And so I think now you're going to start seeing where both parties right now both of them have completely spun out of control, and I think that's when you're going to start seeing more of a shift over the next 4, 8, 12 years. Mm-hmm. You're going to start seeing something change significantly, for the better or the worse.
Hopefully,
you know,
no more people saying, "Oh, let's not bring up politics. Let's not bring up politics." No, whenever someone says that to me, in my opinion, it means that you're incapable of talking about politics without being irrational or too biased, or that you're just too hype in a way that's not constructive. And that to me is very indicative of the problem we have when it comes to, you know, socializing.
It almost got like politics became too personal. You know, like it's like I don't think it's necessarily personal. Like, you know, I think it's more about what's for the greater good of the people. You know, it's not a personal.
Well, that's what the bipartisan system essentially did on purpose. It was to be as divisive as possible, so that people would never unite on certain things. But yet, you know, when it comes to the people in this country, whenever it comes to a bipartisan issue, it's like impossible to ever get one thing done. But then when it comes to, like, a foreign nation like Israel, it's like the most unanimous thing, and that should make people pissed off. We live here and we can't even get our politicians to agree on any, you know, major changes.
And that's why I think that you sit there and that's where they would definitely implement, you know, like term limits, where then, you know, those politicians are not necessarily there for the career of it. They're there for, you know, serving the people. You know, whatever that term limit is, you know, that doesn't really bother me. It's just there should be one. They shouldn't have someone there that's been there 70 some years and they're like 91 years old. You know, like in my mind, it's like there's too many of those. Did they serve well maybe their early years? I don't know the answer.
I'm for smaller government. That's how I've always been.
And that's how I would see it.
I'm for smaller government. I really just think that the more power we give to the government, the more it's like a chokehold onto people, and we're essentially these debt slaves. I mean, it's so blatant. It's so blatant, and I think this is the part where, like, the whole simulation theory comes into play, is when you're a person who's just
there's too much control. There's too much red tape.
When you just look around and you're wanting to, like, go against the grain and just challenge the norm of what you feel like life has been in this bubble you're in, or like cage you're in, and the only real way to breaking out of that is just by, you know, fully embracing the capitalistic mentality, and then you get to like be in that class that gets to look down on everyone. And I think that there's nothing wrong with being a driven person and motivated and working hard and making money and understanding that money represents your value because it represents your work and something you can be proud of. I just think, at what point do we give such power to this mentality that clearly shows that, you know, since we're flawed by design, that corruption is very much the next phase. And through that, when you would, like, that's why I always say, when do you put a cap on capitalism? When do we put the ability to say, hey, like, you can't go this far in terms of...
Well, I think that I don't necessarily think that you need to put a cap on capitalism. I think that if you establish term limits in your...
reminds me of an earlier episode we did.
If you establish...
Early days.
If you establish term limits on, like, your senators and your House of Representatives, that, you know, they don't become politically charged because of foreign lobbying, foreign lobbying,
Yeah,
and then even just like a corporation lobbying, you know, like,
sure.
you know, like you have all these food chains and everything else, that there's all sorts of lobbying going on, and that they start targeting those government officials. So if you put the term limits on it, even if the lobbying still happens, that person's only there for a term, like in a certain amount of definitive time, and a new person comes in that either has to be reconvinced. You know what I mean? Like, at some point, like, it starts recycling more. And you kind of, if there are bad ones that end back in the system, you're never going to prevent that. That, you know, at least they're recycled out over a period of time. You know, like, that's the piece of it, how I look at it.
So that's why we need a system reform, and I believe...
So legislation reform is where I think that what needs to happen.
I believe when the boomer generation, you know, passes on, and we have these, you know, more educated and aware generations of these failing systems, I think we're going to eventually definitely have I don't want to say definitely, we're going to have some system reform, whether it's going to be there's no longer a bipartisan system or there's just smaller government, and I believe those are two of the best hopeful options that we can have. And until then, I think the only way to really secure unity through any political divide is to have dialogue, is to have conversations where it doesn't feel like you should be afraid, but you're only ever empathizing from the place someone's coming from, and just offering perspectives, even if that means planting the seeds, because someone may just really, you know, vote one way because it pertains to one specific issue that matters a lot to them, and vice versa. And I think we have to just empathize that not everyone lives the lives we have. Just like I can't get everyone to empathize on the level I'm feeling through a genocide of my ethnicity. You can't. Yes, some people just naturally, who have no relatability to the issue, might grow to, and it comes natural to them because they're more empathetic in general. But some people may not. So that's why I believe in planting the seeds and having more of that cancellation ideology of just saying, like, well, that person can just go over there. I think should only be applied in, like, really, really, only if it really pertains to a person who's just trying to be divisive and is
more like someone that's really just truly being hateful or just like evil type thing.
Yeah, I'm not saying you have to like really try to rationalize with them, like pretty much any.
You're saying more if someone disagrees with you, don't all of a sudden just shut it down just because there's a disagreement. Just have the conversation of trying to understand where each other is coming from and the differences on the point of view.
I saw a girl who was, I saw a Zionist young lady at campus or whatever. I don't know if it was at campus, but she was like protesting and holding like the Israeli flag and a picture of one of the hostages or whatever. And her and a female Palestinian protester were going, they were having a conversation, and the girl was shouting all these propaganda, talking points. And eventually she calmed down, and the Palestinian girl was like talking to her and like basically giving her side. And eventually she's like, well, I didn't know that. And then eventually by the very end, she was like, I don't agree on everything, but I understand where you're coming from. And then they hugged and it was all fine. And I think if we can just, even me, and I'm saying this to me because I'm not perfect and all that, I get hyper emotional when there's someone who's just like outright denying something that is basically, either it's been debunked and I can say, look, it's debunked, like stop using that talking point, and or they're just denying just to deny, and whatever. I may get emotional or frustrated, but that's a call to myself to say, don't extend that energy or waste it. Rather, put it and apply it to yourself and how you can have better conversations and talking points that are able to be understood rather than to be divisive, you know. And
It's also a better way of, like if you become divisive. If you become divisive, then it's more of like a sense of like aggression. And I think if what you're saying is, as you have conversations on whatever it is, just make sure that we definitely your tone of voice and those type of things, that it's not the aggression coming out of it.
You know what? And that sucks for me because I can say like the sky's blue and I sound angry when I say it, and I don't know why I'm just a hyper passionate person, or I just say things like with.
Yeah, everyone has their passions and everyone gets excited about something, and it's like whoa, But I think
that's me with like 90% of everything, and it's just.
I think it's just more of like you're saying. It's just don't be decisive and just listen to what you're. I'm just regurgitating what you're saying, and agreeing.
Yeah. So have open dialogue. I think we say this on every single podcast, man. We gotta.
I think that's like our catchphrase right now.
Just have an open.
One hit high points. Have open dialogue.
Yeah. I don't know, dude. Like I think nothing, because I'm seeing this, half joint over here, and I think this is just my time to go. So we'll see you whenever.
Bye.
Bye.